All right, so we are moving into the Cold War, and there's a couple things you need to remember from World War II. One, Joseph Stalin was in charge of Russia. It was also called the Soviet Union at the time because he had control of not just not just not just Russia, but the countries around Russia. So he had that as well. So they ended up being called the Soviet Union. So I will probably use them interchangeably. I will say Russia and Soviet Union. Just know that Soviet Union was kind of Russia plus a few other countries that it was kind of in charge of. They would kind of get their independence through the Cold War, which debatably they say it ended. I still see a lot of the same stuff going on that was going on during the Cold War, so I kind of personally would not say it ended. I would say Russia took a big hit, but we're still doing a lot of what we did during that. So I guess maybe the fall of the Soviet Union is kind of like point where people are like, oh yeah, this is kind of the end, but I don't know. All right, so let's look at the first question. First question is, and this is a major just overview. All right, so which two superpowers became enemies in 1945 because their beliefs and objectives were at odds? And you should be able to look at that and know after what I just said. But, so we've got the bear representing Russia, that's their mascot, and we've got Uncle Sam over here, and it was pretty much a two-sided fight with some assistance on each side. All right, Uneasy Allies. The end of World War II saw the defeat of the Axis powers in Germany and Japan and brought freedom and hope to many nations and peoples who had been invaded and conquered by them. The end of the war also brought an end to the Uneasy Alliance which had formed between the democratic Western Allies, Great Britain, France, and the United States, and the Communist Soviet Union, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR. So you'll also see it like this, USSR. So it could be Soviet Union, USSR. Some people would just say Russia because it was the most dominating country within it. The two superpowers, the United States and the USSR, became enemies in 1945 because their beliefs and objectives were completely at odds. This philosophical conflict between the two countries came to be known as the Cold War. So, number one. Oh, yeah, I should probably present. That'd be good. No screen. Any problems? All right. Sorry, guys. All right. United States for number one. I'm going to give you a second. I seem to have issues with presenting. Can I get that answer put into the chat? Maybe I'll have to do it. Thank you. All right. Which country was not occupied by the Soviet Union after World War II? And our options are Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and France. Okay. Soviet areas of influence. The United States and the Democratic Allies throughout the world were committed to the spread of democracy and self-rule among all nations, especially those nations liberated from Nazi oppression. Nazis were members of Hitler's Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, which supported nationalism, military, and racism. The Soviet Union, led by dictator Joseph Stalin, was determined to increase its territorial control and subject these nations to its own communist-controlled government. So Joseph Stalin is very much like Hitler. All right, he wanted to take over places. He just ended up with a lot more people fighting him on it at that point. So he couldn't make as much progress. In Europe, the USSR occupied Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, East Germany, Latvia, and Lithuania, and encouraged a communist-controlled government in Yugoslavia. Soviets increased their influence in Asia by supporting the communist takeover of China. Their efforts to expand communism and the Soviet Union's power were worldwide. All right, so number 2 is France. France was not occupied. All the other ones were under either Russia's control or Russia's influence, or Soviet Russia or Soviet Union or whatever. That's okay. All right. Who first used the term Iron Curtain in a speech? On this side, you can see this is communist areas of influence, or yeah, these are influenced, I think. There are extra countries in here that went with Russia. And then you can see all the democracy over here. All right. An Iron Curtain comes down. Winston Churchill, the great British war leader, declared that an Iron Curtain had come down between the democratic West and the communist Soviet Empire in the East. I do believe that's 2 answers. The aggressive efforts of the Soviet Union were met by a policy of containment by the United States and its allies as they try to keep communism from spreading to other nations. So they're trying to contain communism. For the most part, the Cold War developed not as an actual shooting war, but as a series of actions and reactions by each side as it tried to strengthen its position. This is why you didn't get a World War III. This is why it's unlikely for you to get a World War III, because of the nuclear weapons. Because once one fires it off, the other side's going to fire it off, and then the whole world's going to be destroyed. All right, so number 3 is Winston Churchill. And what did the Iron Curtain divide? It was democracy and communism. So Winston Churchill, and then democracy and communism. And it was a pretty close kind of split where a lot of things that were close to Russia ended up being communist. So he wasn't able to spread out amongst other countries. It would have been hard to strategize, especially now too, since Britain and the United States had super advanced technology. Like before, it was like, all right, like Hitler was dominating in the creation of technology. And then the British caught up and the Americans caught up, and so it was harder at that point. Okay. What word means the rapid increase of? armed to the teeth. Both sides maintained strong armies equipped with the most up-to-date weapons. Their navies were equipped with the best ships and most technologically advanced weapons and guidance systems. Their nuclear-powered submarines patrolled the oceans. Soviet and American air forces were stocked with cutting-edge military planes, as each side sought to build the fastest and most destructive fleet of fighter jets. We see this now too with drones. There was some new jet, I do believe, various different. The technology is increasing and increasing, always to be better than other people, so we can kind of say, hey, don't attack us because we will definitely destroy you, is basically the deal. It's to have enough of an offense that people don't want to attack you because they're like, no, you've got too much. All right. The United States created the first atomic weapons as World War II came to an end. The only 2 atomic bombs ever used in warfare were dropped on the Chinese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bringing an end to the war. After the war, the United States and Soviet Union began building and stockpiling nuclear weapons and the missiles and planes to deliver them. Having nuclear weapons makes you a big-time, gigantic threat, and that is why you'll see specific countries trying very hard to get them. North Korea being one, they want to be taken seriously. Iran being another. They have I do believe, the uranium to do it. There's kind of a tentative back and forth where they keep saying, oh, we're not using it to build nuclear weapons, but then they won't let inspectors go in to see. So it's been a big back and forth. Certain politicians are like, don't trust them. People are trying to make agreements just to keep from going to some kind of war. All right, the Soviets stole some of their technology from the US and developed some of their own. Other major nations developed the technology also, and the proliferation or rapid increase of nuclear weapons became a major world concern. It became obvious the nuclear war was a serious risk to the entire planet, since nations had stockpiles of materials that could destroy the world several times over. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, could carry nuclear destruction across the oceans in a matter of minutes that could lead to annihilation, complete destruction of the planet. So straight up, you shoot off more than one of these. As soon as you shoot off one, you've got radioactivity all around it. So if you don't die instantly, you're going to die of the amount of radioactivity around it. So proliferation for 5. And then for this one, it's going to be annihilation. So both of those were in the same paragraph. All right. What was the name of the alliance of the Soviet Union and its Eastern European satellite nations? All right. Here we've got treaties that were signed regarding nuclear weapons, and it kind of tells you who tested their nuclear weapons. So China, India, Pakistan, Russia. Poor North Korea. They tried one time, but then they needed the Windows update, and Microsoft was like, no, we're not giving you the update. And I was about to die laughing. Israel, they say that they probably have nuclear weapons, but nobody wants to confirm it. I heard by somebody in the military that they did. They said that the button, though, was in the United States. So we're their strongest ally, but basically the deal is they can't do it without us, essentially. France, United Kingdom, so Britain, so forth, and non-signatory state with no, I guess they didn't sign it, they have no nuclear weapons, so I don't. So the white ones are member states, but they don't have weapons. Sign the treaty. And nuclear armed states not party to the NPT, so not part of the treaty. So Pakistan and India, and withdrew from the treaty. That's going to be, North Korea, because they wanted to work on it. Here are your different types. And I am not sure the difference between, wait, maybe UR is a uranium, and I am not sure. Somebody would have a look at probably the periodic table, maybe, what R is and RT. But so these are different types of missiles, nuclear missiles. Cold War alliances. The United States and Western Europe nations established. Oh, I was going to say, you can see how different these are from the atomic bomb ones. All right. The United States and Western European nations established the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, to form a barrier and strong support system against potential Soviet aggression. Other organizations were created with allies in Asia and the Pacific. Member nations pledged to go to war to prevent the USSR and its allies from extending its influence by force. So basically, they're like, all right, we're going to do this together. If they attack, if they are spreading communism, it's coming near us, they try to take over, we're going to be allies. The Soviets created the Warsaw Pact. Warsaw is in Russia. No, it's not. It's in Poland. Poland. Yes, Poland. Warsaw Pact, an alliance of its satellite Eastern European nations, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Romania, to oppose the United States and NATO. Soviets sent troops into Czechoslovakia in 1956 and Hungary in 1968, when those nations threatened to create independent, more democratic governments. All right, so the Soviet Eastern, that is going to be the Warsaw Pact. NATO, I do believe, still exists today, unless it recently broke apart. I don't think so. I think, was that NAFTA or was it NATO? Can't remember. I'd have to look it up. North, I think, was it NAFTA or was it NATO? I can't remember. It was one of the things that Trump was talking about, I do believe, but I can't remember which organization it was now. I thought it was economic, but I could be totally off. In which conflict did the US and the Soviet Union compete against each other without directly fighting each other? All right, so here it just tells you the NATO countries. So basically, you can see Poland switched over. A lot of these other countries basically got help from the US and switched over. Germany was split apart into 4 pieces after World War II, but they ended up unifying again, being allowed to unify. And so they were part of NATO. All right, war by proxy. The United States and the Soviet Union did not directly go to war against each other, but they were often involved in conflicts involving other nations. American participation in the Korean War was an effort by the United States to prevent the spread of communism in Asia. The Vietnam War was an effort by the Soviet Union and China to expand their sphere of influence in the US to contain the spread of communism. The Soviet War in Afghanistan was another effort to extend communist influence. So, kind of the deal here is, hang on, let me go where we started. We started with North with Korea. All right, so Korea ended up split. So we went in there, and that's why you end up with a North and South Korea because of this. So South Korea is democratic, and we support them and help them. North Korea is a communist dictatorship, and you can see pretty big differences between the countries. So, okay, pretty big, gigantic differences, huge, crazy differences. Which also kind of shows you how communism ends up playing out, and I've never seen it be as like Karl Marx would have described it. So that's why a lot of them have communist ideologies, but really they're not communist because they don't follow what communism would be if you actually like wrote it out. All right. The Vietnam War, we don't like to say that we lost this, but we basically lost this. They were, a lot of these are over, like the geography of the region. So if there was a lot of jungle, they knew how to hide. They got weapons. A lot of them Russia supported, so they gave them a lot of weapons. So we pretty much got out of here. Then, where are we at? Afghanistan is still kind of happening. Again, their geography is lots of mountains and stuff, lots of places to hide. So this is very difficult. And yeah, so they're trying to keep Afghanistan under control. So the answer is all of these. Number 8 is all of these. What event almost led to nuclear war? And I have a chapter on this specifically, so it will go into detail. All right. From the brink of nuclear war to disarmament. In 1962, the Soviets built missile bases in Cuba, a Soviet ally and communist nation located just 90 miles from the United States. This is because the United States built a nuclear base in, I do believe, was it? I don't know if it was Italy or definitely a country. It may have been closer than Italy. Anyways, close to Russia. So they built one close to us, which is in Cuba, which is like right near Florida. The U.S. sent ships to blockade Cuba until the missiles and bases were removed. For a few intense days, nuclear war seemed very possible until the situation was finally resolved. Like when we say, okay, let's go. September, leave the Black Sea and bound for Cuba. So they're going in. 24th October, 16, return to alter course. Onslow, large, okay. Okay, so they have a blockade around here, but I mean, if you're shooting these into the air, it's not going to help as much. And evidently they did give the go-ahead to shoot the missiles, but the people hesitated, and luckily they did, because like immediately after they came to a like agreement, or they were about to press the button. It's in the other chapter. For some reason I can't remember it right now. All right, so this was the Cuban Missile Crisis. In what year did the Cold War end? In 1969, the US and the USSR began disarmament discussions, and a series of proposals and treaties finally led to a reduction in nuclear weapons in the 1980s. The end of the Soviet Union came about in 1991, and with its fall came the end of the Cold War. This set the Berlin Wall. We're going to have a chapter on that as well. Again, I'm not particularly in agreement on this. I think there's still a lot of war by proxy and stuff going on. We give weapons to people. Russia gives weapons to people. Same with money. We have alliances that are still very much one against the other. A lot of the our enemies are still our enemies from then.